which fuck Fry, but we endured. But again, these medicines are with us, whether from these lands or not. And Rachel talked about, that portal or that door. And about 10 minutes ago, a eagle or McGeezy was flying over this.
Saludos amigos de Picosa Radio, estamos en el sur de Minneapolis, en la esquina de la 27 y la Longfellow. Una celebración de los natives, de los nativos.
Once told me that the spirits are here. They're just waiting for us to return back to them. And so we will bring back and uplift the spirits that are in these lands that have been waiting for us to practice or to acknowledge them. In talking about continual solidarity in the face of empire, I've been through the shits with Satish and the Sierra Club. Trying to figure out what strategy, what words to say. And so here I'd want to bring up Satish to talk about all that work. Come up, Satish.
When we fight.
Este evento se llama
When we fight. When we fight. And
Cuando peleamos, ganamos.
This struggle for environmental justice here in East Phillips with what's going on around the country. Because when we look at what's going on around the country, it's a dark moment. And it's getting darker. So they're trying to shut down every government website, every federal program, anything that people are doing to try and undo centuries of racism and oppression and colonialism. They're trying to pressure the states and the cities and any institution out there to follow suit, and they're trying to pressure and they're trying to punish anyone who doesn't follow suit. And, thinking about Smith Foundry for a moment, it was a surprise inspection by the EPA that finally got the ball rolling to get Smith Foundry shut down. And now they want to shut the EPA down. But, sorry, I forgot the rest. And they're also trying to shut down the federal funding for environmental justice and for climate action, the kind of cash that would make the vision for this site a reality. A vision that is founded in justice. A vision for land back. A vision for self-determination. A vision that would ensure that the people of East Phillips have clean air to breathe, and clean water to drink, and clean earth to plant. And you know what? When I think back to 2 years ago, I feel hope, because the movement has lessons for us that go beyond East Phillips and go beyond South Minneapolis. 2 years ago, we were just days from the demolition of this site. But our movement has more lives than a cat. It's because our movement is grounded in community, in solidarity, in persistence. On that snowy winter day, our movement didn't give up. It stood up. It stood its ground. It stood this ground. And it stopped the demolition. And now there is a path forward. We've gone a bit further down that path, and we've got bituminous roadways shut down. We've got Smith Foundry shut down. And you know what? It wasn't the EPA that shut down Smith. It was us. And so even at this moment, even in the midst of all of my fears, I have hope. I have hope that I learned in East Phillips. I have hope that I learned from East Phillips. I have hope because where there is life, there is hope. Where there is love, there is hope. Where there is solidarity, there is hope. Where there is community, there is hope. And so, because I learned here what I've heard before, but here is where I learned it, that when we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. When we fight, we win.
This next speaker is one I'm incredibly honored to be in space with still. You know, my organizing path is like non-linear. I didn't go to like the Humphrey Mondale Institute to become a lib. I learned it from the streets. And I think we all learned a piece in May of 2020 when the city received the wrath of God after the murder and lynching of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. This next speaker is a fighter that demonstrates that, you know, much like East Phillips, but when you say you're gonna do the damn thing, you do the damn thing. And that's where we truly understood, again, for this generation, whose streets? Whose streets? And many of us took these teachings from George Floyd Square and brought it to East Phillips. These teachings of solidarity, these demands to expect more of ourselves because we can't expect it from institutions. But more importantly, that we gotta have each other's backs. And so, y'all, I'd like to bring up our auntie, Marsha Howard. Marsha, y'all.
I'm so proud. I am so very proud. At George Floyd Square, we say the earth protests with us and God is on our side. Not for nothing did the earth decide to let these dancers show up and show out in this good weather. Come on now. Where they can show up in their full regalia, right? That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. The earth protests with us. And when we think of the stewardship of this patch of ground, knowing that we are on stolen land that is now being reclaimed and being brought back into the stewardship of who needs to take care of this land, all we can do is rejoice. On 38th and Chicago Avenue, we have stood at that intersection since May 25th, 2020, since the lynching of a black man. That was a spark that galvanized the world to stand up for black and indigenous and people of color all over the world, right? And we did not move. We have not moved. You may have heard, speaking of vetoes, that there is consternation and confusion about what's going to happen with that land, right? Because we still occupy that land. We say, whose streets? Our streets. Right? We say, no justice. No peace. And we mean that shit. And yet, we are there for black lives. Not a building, not a street, but black lives whose blood have sunk into that stolen Dakota land. And y'all gotta be careful, because the colonizers will have you squabbling over zoning laws and deeds and funding and council meetings when you're just saying, give us something that looks like justice, not right? They'll talk about legislative sessions and you talking about justice, right? You'll be talking about treaties, you'll be talking about justice, you'll be talking about asthma, you'll be talking about toxic waste, you'll be talking about things that'll make something just a little bit more even to make up for 400 years or 500 years of oppression. And they want to give you a mural or a statue or a street name, right? But we get to name what justice is, right? It is up to us to tell them what is justice. And I have to give it up to EP&I. I got to give it up to Little Earth. I got to give it up to the environmental table. I got to give it up to this community for showing them what justice looks like. For telling them what community looks like. For showing them what it means to stand in solidarity. And quiet as it's kept, when y'all did that occupation, a little birdie told me y'all needed to be geared up, and you went to another occupation and had to get some gear. No, let me not get arrested up in here. But game recognized game. I'm just saying. Just know that GFS will always stand in solidarity with this community because it is all connected. It is all connected. It will always be connected. And in 2025, at some point, they will act as if there's a pie that they can cut into slices and we all got to get our little share of it. This ain't about no pie. It has never been about a pie. This has always been about justice. This has always been about what's right. This has always been about our relatives. This has always been about the legacy of a nation founded on stolen land, built with stolen and exploited lives. And they owe us something that's going to look and live like justice. And they don't get to decide what that is. We putting our order in. They got to deliver it. Order up. Order up. Order up. It's time. It's time. I know things are happening federally, but there are people out east right now acting like the laws don't apply to them. If that's the way we going, then that's the way we going. Ain't no blue or red. Right now, we're going to live in the world beyond the world we live in. And if you're an indigenous person, I want you to consider living in the world before the world we live in. This is your world because we just living in it. It's your world, we just living in it. It's your world, we just living in it. It's your world, we just living in it. And I mean that. I mean that Step into it. Step into it. Live into it. Live into it. Don't let nobody tell you different. Order up.
These past 5 years, and so much more, but I just wanted to invoke some names right now for those who would want to be here, are here, but were so pivotal for this movement. So for the drummers, if you're able to just hit the drum as I say some names. First one is Trinidad. Bill Jones. Franklin motherfucking Yellow. He would have been happy to be right here with us today. And then Frank Parrow and Clyde Belcourt, who reminded the city of its obligations. One of the first letters of support EP and I ever got for this project came from Clyde. It was a short letter, as you know. He was a man of few words. He just said, give him the damn building. In these times, as Marsha said, there are some people who act like the law don't matter to them. So now more than ever, we need our warriors, whether they be our matriarchs or our males. And someone who teach me about that warrior culture and so many more is Vin Dion. He's a little earther. He's from Southside. Changed his life. And now he's showing these younglings how they need to move and what they'll need to do to keep their community safe. Give it up for Vinny.
Bonjour. Good afternoon, y'all. Am I good right here? My name is Vin Dion. My Ojibwe name is Jaunagijik, means Southern Sky. And I always felt that was a fitting name, being that I'm born and raised on the south side of Minneapolis. So I was born right here over at Little Earth, just a few blocks over here. And I ain't gonna sugarcoat anything to you all. I came up in a rough time at Little Earth. A lot of unhealed trauma. A lot of toxicity. A lot of gang banging culture. A lot of hurt and pain. As a young man, I found myself entrenched in that. And for me, I thought being a warrior was being a gangster. And so I grew up hurting my own people. I grew up selling drugs to my own people. At that time, I was a lost young man. And as you become older and more wiser and more experienced, and you have that lived experience, you realize what life's really all about. And being a warrior is being a person for your people. It's being a fighter for your people. It's not being selfish. It's putting the people first. All the people first. Not just your elders, but the children, your sisters, your brothers. Those ones who can't fight, we fight for them. And I've been through, in my life, I've been through hell and back. I've dealt with every trauma you could imagine. I got some of my best friends who will never get out of prison. And for me, I did 7 years in the Fed system. I got out back in 2019. And I got a second chance at life. While I was in there, I read the books of our AIM leaders. Belcourt, Dennis Banks, Russell Means, these important men. And I read what they went through. Going to prison, changing their life around, wanting to do something better, having that warrior spirit within them, but now coming out here and actually living it. And I was inspired by that. And that's what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it, you know. Lo and behold, though, here it comes. I remember sitting outside my mother's house at Little Earth doing dips on the fence post, and this little young man walks up to me, and he's got these papers, you know, and he's like, I don't know, some kind of voting thing going on for Mille Lacs Band, and I was like, hey, what's your name? What's your name, brother? He's Joe Vitale, and we sat and we had a great conversation, and I'm like, it gave me hope to see a young man out here wanting to do something positive for the people, because I told him I wanted to do the exact same thing. And man, what was that, 6 years ago almost. Since then, we developed a strong relationship. He's a fighter just like I'm a fighter. And up to this fight right here, you know, Joe was filling me in, telling me the things going on, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I was impressed. I was seeing how involved he was in this thing and all these other things in the community, and I know I wanted to get back to that. And so I'd listen to him, and he's telling me about this Roof Depot fight, and yeah, we got it won, brother, and you know, good things are coming. And then I get a phone call from him saying, I need your help. And so, you know, we hit some meetings, and push came to shove, and desperate times call for desperate measures. And we knew what we had to do. And we got everyone together that was willing to put their bodies on the line, to put their freedoms on the line. And we took this place over. And I'm not going to say who, but when the fence was first clipped, there was only about 3 or 4 of us out here. And we thought twice about it, but we're going to do it. And before you know it, man, we had everyone jumping out of the cars, the bushes, everything. And before you know, we had 30 people in here, and we had a ceremony. And then from there, we had more people coming, and more people coming, and we've seen how strong this community truly is. We've had hundreds of people coming in here that day. That night was freezing. It snowed probably 2-3 feet probably, you know, and I remember the police coming raining down on us. I didn't even know we had that many officers, but they showed up and they shut us down. And I remember getting caught on the other side, and I felt weak. I felt helpless because I knew my wife was in here. But we were down on that corner right there, and we held another, like a protest to the protest. And we had about 300 people out there screaming, yelling at the police. And it was beautiful. It was amazing. But I remember going home that night, because it was a cold night, and I felt defeated. I felt like I just got my ass kicked. But I knew we couldn't give up. And I knew we weren't going to give up, because I sat there and I thought about it, and I made this post on Facebook. And I knew we couldn't quit. Even though in that moment I felt defeated, I know we weren't defeated. Because we are resilient. We are strong. When we come together, we're unstoppable. And I learned all that in real time 2 years ago. But making that post, man, it felt good, because I wrote on there this movement that we started here, especially with our indigenous people. A lot of us were new to this, to the activist work, to the organizing work. But to see us all come together, I knew something was being born right then and there. And here we are 2 years later, stronger than ever. And we're not going to stop. It's only going to keep growing and growing. Just like our elders before us, they made us strong, we're going to make it stronger. And I'm going to end with that. Aho, miigwech.
I want to talk a little bit about the police that night that evicted Native people off their land. When you came here, yeah, there was the snow, there was the cold, but when you looked at every street, on the street lamp, you saw a poster for a missing Indigenous woman. You saw it everywhere. And like Vinny said, when it came to evicting Native people from property, the police had time. Instead of... That's the hypocrisy of the system, that we have to remind ourselves why we do what we do. Because we are the ugly reflection that they don't want to see, which is, they ain't doing shit. So that's why we mean it when we say, who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe.
Who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe.
We need to mean that. But now more than ever, with disinformation out there and just everybody has an AI, we need good information to educate our people. And that's why I'm incredibly honored to have Nick Estes here to talk about and the ability to string the past to the future to the present. We need that education, because how do we know where we need to go without knowing where we've been? It's not just the cultural practice, although that
Sur de
is incredibly
Minneapolis,
important.
la
We need to know the
27
history of
y la
space,
Longfellow para los que quieran venir.
so we don't repeat the harms of the past. So y'all, give it up for Nick Estes. He's not behind me. I had to get you.
Haumatakiapi. Joe puts me last, and everybody's like ready to go. Just kidding. I just want to thank everyone that showed up and spoke earlier. I think everyone said a lot of the things that I would say and have experienced in this movement. And you know, when I came to Minneapolis, this is one of the first or the second campaign that I was involved in here. The first was the March for Justice, which happened started at Little Earth and ended in Washington, D.C. And that was for clemency for Leonard Peltier. We won that one. The second one was for a land back campaign and environmental justice within the city. We won that one. So we have a good winning streak so far, and I just want to say that it wasn't just young people leading these fights, but they injected a new kind of spirit and tactic and approach to both of these struggles that made them successful. Again, elders, previous generation opened that door for us, and I want to honor that. And I also want to say we need to put the movement in context a lot of times. We need to understand the stakes. And I'm going to give you two stories. I'm going to give you a story about when I was in New Mexico and we were fighting against the Bureau of Land Management, leasing out Navajo and Pueblo lands to put toxic fracked water back into the water system. And we had all these environmental organizations. We went out, we signed petitions, we talked to the governor's people, we talked to the senators, we talked to the Congress people, the legislators. Every municipality, we went on the reservations, talked to the chapter houses, had marches, had teach-ins, and it was all leading up to this big march that we were supposed to have. And this is, Trump time, this is before the COVID pandemic. And all these, organizations were donating millions of dollars to do decolonization, indigenous justice, environmental justice. Of course, we didn't get any of that money. But they were using us in many ways to promote these larger environmental justice policies and frameworks. And so we showed up at the BLM office, Bureau of Land Management office, not Black Lives Matter, but BLM, the bad one. And we had all these elders from the Pueblos come out, and all the Navajo leaders come out, and they're holding the staff, and it was wild, man, because some of the elders said, we haven't experienced this kind of activism and mobilization since the 70s. And we're all sitting there, you know, they had the AIM song going, all that stuff, and then this charter bus pulls up, and the white environmental organizations get off, and everyone's like, yeah, we're united. Let's take the street. So we all, you know, it was just like, took the street. And all of a sudden we realized that half the people were moving into the street and the other half were getting back on the buses. And there was kind of a moment of consternation. What do we do? We're surrounded by police. They said it's federal property. No, 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 you bad Indians. Can't look bad. But the elder said, we have the staff, it'll protect us. And so we marched. And the white environmental organizations got on the bus and probably went back to Taos or whatever. The point of the story is we stopped the leases. Because we escalated. We took a risk. We followed our prayers. We followed the leadership of the communities. We took environmental justice seriously, not as a metaphor. We understood that some people might get arrested, that it wasn't a comfortable thing to do, but protecting the earth and the water that we all drink was more important than getting the $1 million grant, right? So I use that story as an example because this last year we've seen a lot of people sort of hedging bets with this new administration. We had a genocide in Palestine. People were like, hey, you know, you guys, let's slow down a little bit, you guys. You know, we have to win this. So they picked a candidate, they picked their own people, and they said, you know, get behind it. It was like probably, you know, lowest common denominator kind of stuff. And they lost. And the people who were telling us to hedge their bets are now getting their funding cut. They decided to play it safe, while some of us were still marching in the streets. And now we're all in the same situation, right? So we have to learn these lessons. And I think the Roof Depot teaches us something very valuable that we're taught, you know, through civil discourse, civil disobedience. I hate those words, because what's the opposite of civil? Savage, wild, right? That's what they've been calling us all this time. Civil disobedience. You know, you guys have to appeal and cry on the man who stole your land, or you got to cry on his shoulder, ask for forgiveness, you know, just make sure that they're okay with giving you land back. And that's not how it goes. We're never going to win if that's what, you know, if that's our tactic and our strategy. Because the natural response was what Vinny, what Rachel, what Nicole, what Jolene talked about, was to defend, to use spiritual law against the colonizer's law, to enact our form of justice that's meaningful for us, not for them. And look where it got us. I think Joe asked me earlier to come up and say some stuff, and I bring up those examples because sometimes the movement is actually strongest when there's more repression, when things actually look more bleak. No better example of that exists than Leonard Peltier's campaign. For 50 years, 5 decades, that man sat in prison. I joined his campaign a decade ago when I came from the camps of Standing Rock after getting shot with tear gas, pepper spray, all kinds of things. You know, flashbangs. There's a lot of trauma, you know. I went from the Standing Rock camps to Washington, D.C. to lobby Democratic congresspeople, and that's something I don't do. If you know me, I don't do that. It's not something I want to do, because we saw it as his last chance. There's a favorable administration. Obama appointed some Native people to some, you know, high-level positions. So we might have an audience. There might be a chance. There was probably about 6 of us who went into Washington, D.C. And all the Democrats either shut their door on us or they send out low-level staffers. They didn't want anything to do with Leonard Peltier. A man who was convicted by a white jury of killing 2 FBI agents? That's not going to look good for us under the Trump administration. That was basically the sentiment they told us. They said, good luck, it's not going to happen, right? They said it was impossible. I remember feeling really low one night, and the next morning I woke up, and Leonard Peltier's son, Wahachanka Paul Shields, had passed away in the room next to me, the hotel room in Washington, D.C. His son died fighting for his father's freedom, asking for humanity from people who kept him in prison. They could have released him the day he was convicted. All those administrations, Congress people, all kept him in prison. Let his family suffer, stole him away from us. And the next morning, after finding out that Paul had passed away, I was sitting outside with one of our elders, Norman Patrick Brown, who shared some mountain tobacco with me. He was there. He was 14 years old the day of the shootout. His best friend, Joe Stuntz, was shot by FBI agents. Nobody ever remembers his name. He's just a native man who got killed. Defending, he was fighting. He was fighting. He was shooting back. We're not perfect victims. We can't fall into this trap of trying to construct ourselves as perfect victims to the colonizer. But he was fighting to protect elders and children who were escaping, who were caught in the crossfire between the FBI, the BIA, and the people who were encamping there. He was killed. Norman Patrick Brown has lived his entire life defined by that one moment. That the FBI can come in and raid, shoot your friend, put your leader in prison, persecute you, tarnish your name, scare you, terrorize you, take away your family, they threaten to take away his mother, take him away from his own family. And he lived with that for 5 decades. And in that moment, when he was telling me the story, I was thinking, do I have the spiritual strength to sit 5 decades in prison, to resist the most powerful, violent empire in the history of humanity? Do I have what it takes? Would I give up my life to do that? Because generations of people, 5 generations of people, waited and fought and prayed for him to get out of prison. Some of them passed away before they experienced his return home. I'm lucky my daughter will get to see Leonard Peltier as a free man in his own homelands. And that's because of the sacrifices that those people made generation after generation when when the movement was low, when they said, no, nothing can be done. We're taught that, we need to de-escalate and calm down and have, civil discourse. But sometimes the natural response is to escalate and to defend. It's always in defense of something, to protect something, as Rachel said earlier, that we all share. We all share this earth. And in this moment, it's very scary with what the Trump administration is doing, but as Indigenous people, we're on a different timeline. This is a centuries-long fight. And we invite you to join that timeline, to not get caught up in these cycles of electoral politics, to understand that this movement goes beyond the ballot box, that some people vote with their feet, their spirits, that they sacrifice for us to enjoy a victory, right? This is a happy day. Sorry for bringing it into a serious moment, but this is a really happy day. But I just want to put that into perspective so that we understand the significance of freeing one of our elders, to return home, to just watch TV, watch Res Dogs, whatever he wants to do, man. Drink a 2-liter of Pepsi, I don't care, Take it for granted, like we do sometimes. But that prayer, whatever kept him, and our auntie over here said this is spiritual warfare at the end of the day. How are we protecting ourselves and our community from the relentless assault on our languages and our cultures, right? It is also a very tangible thing. We simply can't go without drinking water. We simply can't breathe toxic air. It will kill us. And like some of those who came before us, expecting the colonizer to change can also kill you. So, I'll leave it there. I just want to say thank you all for coming out. This is a really beautiful ceremony. Talk to us.
Give it up for Nick Estes, y'all. Thank you, Chi McWish, for putting things into context. And our last speaker here is CJ from the Climate Justice Committee. And, you know, this neighborhood, this movement owes the Climate Justice Committee an incredible debt. Because y'all taught us, or more importantly, reminded us that sometimes you need to get down and nasty. But more importantly, I hope not. But also more importantly, with that is you got to respect the diversity of tactics. You're gonna get the folks that feel comfortable waiting for the colonizer, but then you're gonna get the folks that are gonna show up at your front door, and much more. And so, give it up for CJ and the Climate Justice Committee.
Thank you very much, everybody. I wanted to give a shout out because I actually recognize a few people here who were out there with us in below zero weather, in not good enough shoes, knocking on every door in this neighborhood. And so if you were out there door knocking with us, I want you to give yourself a pat on the back. Because what happened here couldn't have been done without the cosign of the neighborhood and without specifically Little Earth letting us in to their space and to their community. We could not have had the direct action meetings, the planning, the level of organization and coordination without us being allowed in to the office space at Little Earth. In a very literal way, Little Earth letting everybody in is what let everybody win. And I wanted to give a shout out to that before anything, and say thank you. And thank you to 2501 Cedar Avenue. Thank you for letting this happen. Thank you for letting us be here. And, you know, Rachel, you know, made a reference to the city council meeting that everyone came to, and I wanted to elaborate on that council meeting a little bit. It was, as far as we know, maybe the first time that the city council chamber had been filled with an all-indigenous audience. And it was suspiciously the first time that the city council that I know of remembered, air quotes, that it had a 30-person occupancy limit, and tried to shove everybody out. And with the way that the Star Tribune, the Fry administration's mouthpiece of choice, wrote about it, you would have thought that the city council was under siege by terrorists. You would have thought that Jacob Fry fully was convinced he was going to be assassinated. It was honestly kind of hilarious how pathetic and scared they were by the community showing up and telling them for the umpteenth time, because this was also not the first time that, it makes me angry to think about, not the first time that women from Little Earth had come to the city council and showed them pictures of their dead children who had died because of conditions they weren't born with, because of the pollution that had been shoved into this neighborhood, not by their choice, against their consent. Showed them the pictures of these children, alive and dead, with these heart conditions, with asthma, 3-year-olds who couldn't breathe in the winter, who couldn't go to school, couldn't go to daycare when it was too cold out, because their lungs would seize up if it was below a certain degree. And the city council was like, We hear you. We see your concerns. You know, everybody needs a chance to weigh in on this situation, which is just not true. The community needed a chance to weigh in. They were determined not to give it to them. And so I wanted to thank Cassie and Nicole and all the mothers of Little Earth, in addition to thanking Little Earth itself, because the power that they gave to the campaign was unparalleled. It was unlike anything that we could have done. You know, training people on what their legal rights are, training people on what it looks like to do, you know, things that are for better or for worse illegal for the community it was a very educational experience for me, and I wanted to thank everyone again. I can't thank them enough. And I just wanted to close things out because we've been here a while, and I don't want to take up more of your valuable time. I want to give the community the space to celebrate and to not have to fight for at least a few hours, to not have to do the thing that they do every day, pretty much, and that I know they must get tired of after a while, but that they get up and do every day. And so I wanted to say thank you for a chapter in my life that was very influential, going to that street corner every day, every week or so, watching dancers, watching people, watching community members getting out there in way too cold weather to knock on doors to a community that was so receptive that it blew my mind. I was terrified the first time I went to door knock because I have social anxiety, but after that I was so excited to meet all of you, to meet all of your neighbors, because they were all down. I didn't have to say very much. They were very into it from the jump, and I wanted to say thank you again, and I wanted to close us out. Who keeps us safe? Who keeps us safe? Who keeps us safe? Thank you, East Phillips. Thank you, Little Earth. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Right back again. Susana and her kapuli, please.
Amigos que preguntan dónde estamos en la esquina de la 27 y la Longfellow, a una calle de la Ciudad, sobre la 27 en el sur de Minneapolis.
Thank you all. Thank you all for taking your time, celebrating with us all. Please get some food. There's like pizza somewhere, I think. There's still cookies, coffee, and tea.
Despedimos esta transmisión, amigos de Picosa Radio. Gracias. Gracias por compartir. Esta es una celebración en el sur de Minneapolis. La comunidad de esta zona logró cerrar esta fábrica que estaba contaminando ya 2 años. Entonces es una gran celebración el día de hoy. Gracias. Buenas tardes.